The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. This is Mark Semple calling from, on the webinar here from Sunrise Systems. I'll be your presenter today. I have Chris Boz from BCA on the line, and I'll have Chris speak a few things, and then we'll get started here.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our 7th session for the Financial Disclosure Statement training. As Mark said, he's pretty much going to lead the webinar. As we've gone through each of these, the presentation has matured somewhat based on the questions that we've been receiving, because obviously most of the questions have been very similar, if not identical. So Mark has incorporated those answers into the presentation. The only thing I want to say from the get-go is that I just want to go over, for those of you who are registered municipal clerks, the certification unit did approve this for one contact hour in the records category. We sent out a GovConnect notice a week ago on April 8th. It had a link to the form that you'll use to apply for the credit. It's called the Individual Continuing Education Agreement form. It's on the division's website, and the link was in the GovConnect notice. If you don't have that GovConnect notice, all you got to do is go to the certification section of our webpage. And you'll see the form and the list of forms that are available there. What I'm going to do is, during the presentation, I'm going to announce 3 code words. The code words are generated by an online code generator program, which, believe it or not, exists. So the words might be a little funny or a little strange. But in about 10 minutes, I'll give everybody the first code word. What you're going to do is write it down. And then in a half hour, I'll give you the second one, and somewhere near the end of the presentation, I'll give you the third one. On that form that you're going to submit to the certification unit, you're going to write the 3 code words on the form. That way, we know that you attended the presentation and are entitled to the credit. Dan Kaminsky, the certification unit manager, did ask that I request that if it's possible, that you please email Dan instead of faxing it. I'm going to give you Dan's email address. If you don't have the ability to scan that form, that's fine. Just fax it in the normal course. But it would be helpful to Dan if you email it. He can just do a reply and say that your credit was approved. Dan's email address is Daniel, D-A-N-I-E-L, decimal point, Kaminsky, K-A-M-I-N-S-K-I, at dca.state.nj.us. And if you didn't hear that, if you just go to our website under the contact us, you'll see Dan's email address there. You can just do a direct link to it. So in about 10 minutes, I'll give you the first code word. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. So we're going to get started here. I'm going to go over how the webinar is going to work today. I can't hear you directly. Chris can't hear you directly. So we're going to ask that if you have any questions, and we'll stop at different points through the presentation to answer any questions we have so far. But we ask that if you have any questions in the webinar panel that came up when you first logged into the webinar, down in the bottom section, there's a chat section. We ask that you type your questions in that section, and then we'll go through the questions, like I said, at various points throughout today's webinar. That being said, everybody should be seeing my screen. They should be seeing the PowerPoint up here on the screen. And basically, I'm going to give you a quick summary of what we're going to cover today. We're going to go the full hour, even a little bit over, depending on how many questions we have. Chris and I will stay on the call until the very end, till all questions are asked. So don't worry that we're going to cut this off right at 11 o'clock. So that being said, so our training summary today is going to be, we're going to talk about how to log into the new FDS system, how you're going to be able to create and maintain your LGO roster, how an LGO sets up an account, and since we have the majority of the participants on today's call are municipal clerks, you have to file, so this will be a good exercise for you to see on how an account gets set up. Again, how we file that FDS, and then eventually, once an FDS is filed, how can the public go in and actually search for that FDS out on the public website. A couple of terms that I do use today throughout my presentation. If everybody's not familiar with them already, I'll just kind of go over them real quick. If I refer to LGS, I'm referring to Local Government Services or the DCA. If I refer to an LGE, that's your local government entity, so that's going to be the people that are on today's call, organizations who are required to create their rosters and manage their rosters, so municipalities, colleges, counties, JIFs, what have you. LGO stands for the local government officials. Those are the people who have to actually file, which is the last item here, which is their FDS, financial disclosure statement. So those are the terms that I use, those three-letter acronyms, as we go through today's session. If you're not familiar with them, just want to kind of present them to you right now so you understand what they are. So let's do this. I'm going to come to my login page for the FDS system. And just to make sure that everybody can see my screen or they see this login page, if I can get a couple of people just in the chat section to answer yes, that they can see my screen and they can hear me correctly, that'll be great, and we'll actually get started, just so I understand that. Very good. Okay, so I got a bunch of yeses. I know we're okay. So, and I understand that you can, that's the place that you'll go to ask your questions as we go along, so I appreciate all the yes responses that I just received. So let me clear this off. Okay, so right now the page that I'm on is the login page. This is where you as an LGE will come to log into the system in order to create your roster, manage your roster, update your roster, so on and so forth. This is also the same screen that both the Local Government Services group comes to actually manage the entities. This is where the LGOs will come to also to enter in their register and log in to submit their financial disclosure statement. So a couple things I want to go over first. This is a web-based system, so as long as you have a computer with internet access, you or anybody else that needs to access the system will be able to actually get to this login page and access the system. We have listed at the bottom of the screen here some system requirements. From a hardware standpoint, a Windows PC or an Apple Mac will work fine. I've actually logged into the system through my iPad, so we do know that, you know, some of the tablets do work if people want to go in that way. From a browser standpoint, we do support all the different browsers, Internet Explorer, Mozilla Firefox, Apple Safari, Google Chrome. So it is browser independent. We do ask, however, that if you're using your computers, that you do either enable pop-ups and allow cookies and add the website to your trusted sites. There are certain areas as we go through the system today that pop-ups will occur, so we do ask that you allow, you know, this URL to trust that site. We do ask, again, with some of these pop-ups, we do display certain things in PDF forms, especially the financial disclosure statement, so we ask that you have at least Adobe Acrobat Reader or some type of equivalent PDF viewing software that you can be able to review the FDS. And then from a resolution standpoint, this is the minimum resolution that we ask that you have your screen at in order to basically utilize the system. Before I log into the system, and we'll talk about logins and passwords in a few seconds, but once you get your username and the password, I do know people at times will forget what their password is. So I do want to point out that right here on the first screen, we do have a forget password link right here at the bottom right-hand corner of the login section. If you click on that forgot password link, what it will ask you to do is put in your login email address. Okay, this will be the email address or login name or username that's assigned to you. If I come in here and I put my email address in here, okay, what I would do then is click on get password. And if I have typed in a valid email address that's registered within the system, then my password will be emailed to me. But as you can see right now, I have a message that came up in red that says given email ID is not registered in the system. Anytime you do an operation within the system, if that operation isn't successful, you will get a message in red, just like I did here, and it will usually tell you the reason why. As you can see right now, it's telling me that the email address that I put in is invalid. It's not going to email any password, you know, to me. But if I come in here and I just change, I said, oh, you know, I hit a few extra characters. I'm going to put in my correct email address. At this point in time, if I click on get password, then what we'll see is we'll see a message here that the email, the password has been emailed to that email address. So it's been successful. And then some of our messages that you'll see within the system when they're successful will be in the color green. So you can kind of distinguish if the operation that you're doing within the system is successful or not successful based on the color of the message that you get. So I just wanted to kind of point that out in case anybody forgets their password initially when they first start using the system. And that applies to the LGOs, the LGEs, the LGSs. Anybody who's registered in the system can always click on that forgot password, and they can actually get their password at that point in time. So let's talk about the login screen. It says login email. Ultimately, what this is going to be, it's going to be your username to log into the system. Those usernames are going to be distributed to you by the DCA. We're working on formulating that list right now. I know the DCA has captured the majority of the email addresses from the GovConnect site, so that's what they're going to be utilizing as the email address and username that we set up within the system. We will be setting up a temporary password along with that username, so when that username and password gets sent to you, it will be a temporary password. We're going to ask that you actually change that temporary password the first time you log into the system. So that's what we're going to do now is we're going to come in here, we're going to log into the system, and I'm going to start showing you how the system works. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to log in as an LGE. Okay, so I'm going to use Municipal Clerk as an example. So I just received my username and password from the DCA. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to log in. So I'm going to put in my username, and I will put in my password. Click on the login button right here in the middle of the screen. And what this will do is this will log me into the system. So this will be the home screen that you actually see when you first log into the system. So a couple of things I want to point out on the screen that you'll see as we come on, just so you're aware when you first log into the system. In the upper right-hand corner of this screen, you're going to see a name listed. This will be your name, or the entity or the email address that we used. That will be the person's name that we registered within the system. I'm actually going to be using Edison Township and South Brunswick Township as my test townships today as we go through this training. Cheryl happens to be the clerk in Edison Township, and as you can see right below that, it will tell you Edison Township, County of Middlesex. So you should see your username, you should see your name listed up here, and you should also see the entity that you belong to listed here. Just below that, you'll see a logout link listed here. There are a couple of ways you can actually log out of the system. One could be clicking on this logout link, just by clicking on that. The other way is, since this is a browser-based system, however you close your browser, whether you click on the red X in the upper right-hand corner or some other way to close your window, that will also log you out of the system. And then the third way you can be logged out of the system is that if you have logged into the system and you haven't done any work within the system for a period of time, the system will automatically log you out for security reasons. So again, if you're logged in, I haven't done anything, I just left myself logged in, again, after a period of time, the system's automatically going to log you out of the system. So those are the different ways you can either log out of the system or be logged out of the system. You'll also see on what we consider this to be the home page, what you'll also see is a status bar here. And a couple of things in the status bar that you see is you'll see the submission year, and it should be the current year that you're operating in. And this year we're operating in 2014. The DCA will be responsible for changing over the year when we go into next year, into 2015. But whatever year you see listed as the submission year, that's the year that the FDSs or the LGOs that are filing will be filing in. So again, come January 1st of next year, or right around that date, we should actually see the submission year change over from 2014 to 2015. You'll also see some stats on how many LGOs you have on your roster. In this case, I have LGOs on my roster. And out of that 8 LGOs, 8 of those people have actually submitted FDSs. Okay, so this is a quick way for you to view when you first log into the system to know how many people are on your roster, and out of those, that number of people, how many people have actually filed their FDSs. Down below will be some quick links that we're going to go into in a few seconds. So before I go into the links, I'm going to pause there for a second. I'm going to have Chris give his first code word.
Okay, everybody, write this down. The first code word is TIN. T-I-N as in Nancy. TIN. T as in Tom, I-N as in Nancy. TIN.
Very good. Thanks, Chris. Okay, so that would be the first code word for the people who are going to apply for CEUs for this webinar. That would be the first code word that you would write down on your form. Okay, so let's continue here. So the first place we're going to go into is we're actually going to go into, as I had mentioned before, when you get your username and your password, that password is going to be a temporary password. So the first area that we're going to ask you to go into is right here where it says Edit Local Government Entity Profile. And if I click on that link, that's actually going to take me into the profile screen. What we would ask you to do, or what we would like you to do, is first of all, the information that actually comes up in the screen, we would ask you to just review that information to make sure the information is correct. But really more importantly, it's going to be the section down below, the last two fields where it says password and confirm password. What we would ask you to do is just clear out those two fields and then type in a new password following the guidelines that are listed below, which means that your password needs to be between 8 and 16 characters in length, and it needs to contain at least one letter and one number in your password. So if I came in here and I went to type my password and then confirm it, okay, what I would do then is after I type that password and that confirmation password, I click on the Save button right here at the bottom of the screen, and then look at what I got. I got a pop-up message that tells me that my password doesn't conform to the guidelines that we set. So this is one of the messages you'll see throughout the system when something doesn't always comply with what you're doing. So here I'll just click OK. I didn't put in the full password here, so let me come in here and finish that. So I'll correct that. And then what I'll do now is I'll click on Save again. And then what we should get in a message at the top of the screen and also at the bottom of the screen in green that tells me my operation has been successful. In this case, my password has been updated successfully. So that's going to be your new password once you come in and change it. If an operation isn't successful, let's say I didn't type in the phone number correctly when I was putting the phone number in, and I clicked on Save, as I had mentioned earlier, messages in red will come up when an operation isn't successful. And usually we display what the problem is. In this case, it tells you that the representative's phone number is not valid. In this case, I just correct it. I come in here and put the 0 back in that I had taken off by accident. I click on Save, and then it gives me that green message again that tells me that my operation has been successful. So again, that's how you would come in and change your password, and those are some of the messages you actually get as you do operations within the system. Then I'm going to take us back out to our home screen by clicking on the home link right here. And now on my home screen, we do have two other links here. One is a reports link, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But really, the main important thing of the system, or what you're going to be working on, is going to be this Manage LGO roster. So that's the link I'm going to click on right now. And as I click on that link, what you'll see is I already have people listed on my roster. When you first come in for the very first time, you will not have a roster there. You need to build your roster. Now, what's going to be a little bit different with the system this year than what has happened in the past is generally in the past, your rosters were created after the fact and I believe sent to the DCA at that point in time. But in order for this whole process to get started and for your LGOs, your local government officials, to be able to file their FDSs, they're going to have to appear on your roster first. So you're going to have to create this roster from the beginning and get those LGOs on the roster. The very first time that you come into this screen, obviously you're not going to have anybody listed because you haven't created your roster. So one of the questions that has come up with previous webinars that we've done is, well, what about the rosters that we've created in the past and we've submitted? We took a look at the information that has been submitted in the past, and it was determined that the quality of that data wasn't such to really migrate that information into the system, into the new system. There was a lot of inaccuracy, so what was decided was that rosters would be created from scratch for this year. We do realize that the bulk of the work is going to happen this year with the creation of those rosters, but the good thing is that going into subsequent years, 2015, 2016, so on and so forth, those rosters from this year will be copied over to next year, and then come next year, all you have to do is any additional maintenance on that roster. You would add anybody new that's now required to file an FDS within your organization, or if there are people on your roster that are no longer with your organization, then you could actually disable them and remove them from your roster as well too. So really next year you don't have to create that entire roster again. You're just doing maintenance on that roster, just adding new people and removing the old people who don't belong on the roster at that time. But since I've come into an organization where I already have a roster created, one of the things I can do, or one of the things you'll see on the screen is up at the top here, we give you the ability to actually search individuals that are on your roster. Now, we know we're dealing with different size organizations. We're going to have people that have a roster that might have 30 or 40 people on the roster. We have larger municipalities and counties that might have several hundred people on the roster. So instead of going through page by page by page looking for the individual, what you could do is you actually type their last name or their first name or both to actually just go right to their information. So if I was looking for a person, let's say Williams, right, as the last name, and I type Williams in the last name field and I hit search, the system will bring up anybody with the last name Williams. Okay, so I had one person that came up with the last name Williams, in this case Michael Williams. I can also search by first name as well too, right? And I could do partial searches. I don't have to type in the full name. So if I just put, give me everybody whose first name starts with M, I just put M in the first name field and I hit search, well, the system will give me everybody that's in the system with a first name M, and we'll see we got two different people that came up, myself and Michael. Okay, so again, as we do those searches, I can search either first name, last name, or a combination thereof. If I did everybody with the last name W and hit search, then we have everybody whose last name starts with W, Walker, White, Williams, Woodland. All those different people come up in our list. So again, those are different ways you can actually search and bring up individuals within your list. Down below will be your search results. Okay, now when we first come into this screen, it's going to give me everybody that's on my roster. What we consider this here, what we call this down here, is our search grid. And one of the neat things about our search grid is that all these different columns, whether it's last name, first name, board/agency, title, login name, PIN number, FDS file, if you click on the column heading, and I'm going to click on first name, by clicking the first time, I do a first click, the system will automatically sort that column in ascending order, right? So we'll see now this is in alphabetical order in ascending order. If I click it a second time, then it puts the order in descending order, okay? So any column that I go to, by clicking on that column the first time, it will put it in ascending order. Second click will put it into descending order. And I could do that with any of the columns that I go through. So again, those are the different columns that you see. Over to the right, the last three columns, or actually four columns, I'll explain that to you. One will be a PIN number, and we're going to talk about PIN numbers in a few seconds when we actually add new LGOs to the roster. And then we have a column there that says FDS file, so you'll see that most of the entries there are yes, but we do have a few at the bottom that say no. And again, I could sort that column just by clicking on it and bring all the no's to the top, right? So I have a couple people who haven't filed their FDS. We have a column that says active, and there'll be some check marks there. The ones that aren't checked are people that we've disabled or made inactive on the roster. They're no longer part of the organization. And then we have an edit link here where once somebody's on your roster, you can actually go in and edit their information. And we'll come back to that in a little while, and we'll talk about that edit function. At the bottom of the screen, there'll be a button that says Add LGO. This is where we're going to come in and we're going to add our new LGO to the system. So that being said, I'm just going to do a quick pause, just take a look at a couple of the questions real quick. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so one of the questions says, what is the actual website to go to? At this point in time, I'm working in our test system. We are still working out the details for the live site. That information will be relayed over to you once the system goes live and once your username and password, temporary password, is sent to you. So we don't have the actual URL set up yet. We are trying to come up with a very simple, common type URL, something like fds.state.nj.gov, so people know where to go to. But once that URL is established, there will be links, especially out on the DTA site, that people can just go to and click. And then once you have that URL, you're more than welcome to take that URL, and even on your organization's website, you can actually add that somewhere on your website as well, too, to direct people out to that. But that information will be sent once we send out the usernames and passwords. Let's see here. Okay, I have a few people who said that they having problems seeing the screen. I'm looking at the screens here, and I see that we are moving along, and you should be seeing what I'm seeing. But if you do have a problem, both either video or audio, what I would suggest is maybe log out and log back in and try again. It should actually refresh, and it could be based on the browser that you're using to come in here. So, if that has, if you're still having problems, please send me another message, and we'll see if we can, take care of that for you. Let's go down here, a couple of other questions. Okay. One question says, does every LGO need an email address as a login name? The answer is going to be yes. When we get to setting up an LGO, I will show you how to do that. But yes, the quick answer is yes. All LGOs will need an email address in order to log into the system and use the system. So we'll get to that in a few minutes. Okay, so I've gone through the questions that I have right at the moment. So let's talk about adding somebody to our roster. How do we do that? Well, we'll click on the button here that says Add LGO at the bottom. And what this is going to do is this is going to open up a screen, okay, where it's going to have a couple of different sections. So the first section that we're going to start with to add this LGO to our roster is going to be at the top. Now, any field that has a red asterisk next to it is going to be a required field. So we're going to have to enter information into those fields. So today, what I'm going to be using is I'm going to be using another common name here, Stephen Williams, okay, is going to be my LGO that I'm entering in. Now, one of the things I will talk about real quick with the first name field is one of the recommendations that I make is that you use the legal name, first name of the person who you're entering onto your roster. A lot of people I know go by short names or their nicknames and so on and so forth. But I think to make things easier throughout, if you use their legal name, first name and last name, it just makes things a little bit easier. But again, if you insist on using their short name, that's fine as well too. But it's just a recommendation that we have. The other thing is you'll notice that the middle name field doesn't have a red asterisk. We're not requiring middle name. Obviously, not everybody has a middle name. But what I would recommend is that if I have more than one Steve or Stephen Williams in my organization, you might want to enter a middle name or a middle initial so you can distinguish between, who's who within the system. So again, those are things that you're going to want to kind of do or manage within the system. Now, you'll notice to the right, PIN number right now, or PIN section says not applicable. A PIN number has not been assigned yet by the system. But as soon as I click on the Save link right here, the Save button, the system is going to sequentially generate a PIN number for Steve Williams. So let's talk a little bit about the PIN number, what the PIN number does within the system. As an LGE, it will be your responsibility as you set up these users on your roster to communicate that PIN number to those LGOs. The LGO is going to need to use that PIN number in order to create their account on the system. Now, we're going to give you the ability at the bottom of the screen, once we're done entering the different positions that this LGO has within the organization, to actually print out this screen that you can actually hand that piece of paper to the LGO with their information on it. Or some people have asked, well, can I just email the information to them? Absolutely. Really, the three pieces of information that you need when you communicate with them are going to be the first name that you entered, how you entered it in, the last name and how you entered it, and the PIN number. Okay, those three pieces of information the LGO is going to need in order to register or get created or start within the system and file their FDS. Now, once you create that initial information at the top and you generate a PIN number, then we can come to the middle section here where we can add the different positions that this LGO has within your organization. So the first thing we're going to do is pick a category. I'm going to say that Steve is an elected official. I'm going to say he's part of the governing body, and he's a council person. Okay, so that's going to be the first position that I'm creating for Steve within the system. You'll also notice in this section we have a term effective from and to date. It's not a required field, but we do recommend that if you have that information readily available, you enter that information in. This information will appear on the FDS next to this position when Steve goes and files his FDS. But if you don't have it right now, don't worry about it. It's not a required field, but again, if you do, please enter it in. Once I enter that position information in, what I will do is click on Save. And as soon as I do that, you'll notice at the bottom in the next section where it says List of Positions Held, right now it does not have any positions held. So as soon as I click on Save, the system will now add that position to the bottom. Okay, so we'll see elected official, governing body, and it's a council person. Now, you notice there that I actually spelled governing body incorrect, right? So what I can do is, in order to correct that, I can just delete this real quick. Okay, it says, are you sure you want to delete this position? I'm going to say yeah, and then I'm just going to come back in and I'm just going to add it again. And I'm going to say he's council person. And hit save again, and now it's added and it's spelled correctly. Okay, so you can kind of see I made a typo there, but I was able to delete it and add it. Now, if Steve has another position within my organization, I can add a second position or third or fourth, however many positions he has within our organization. So here I'm going to say that he is on the planning board and that he's a member. So I'm going to add that position as well too. I'm going to click on save. And now you'll notice under my list of positions down at the bottom, we have both listed here. One is a council person and one is a planning board member. And again, I can add as many positions as I need to for Steve within my organization. So another question that comes up is, you know that Steve is a member of something else or part of another organization. You don't have to worry about that. It's going to be that other entity's responsibility to put Steve on their roster and give Steve his PIN number from that entity at that point in time. You're only responsible for the positions within your organization. Now, at this point in time, if I have any other, if I want to continue to add to my roster and I have other LGOs that I want to enter in, all I need to do at this point in time is click on the button up at the top that says Add New LGO. And at this point in time, what I can do is now put the first and last name for the next LGO and add them to our system. So again, I can just go through this and just keep adding individuals, so on and so forth to my roster. Let's go back. I'm going to click on the back button to my roster. Okay. Now what we'll see down below here is we will see Steve Williams listed in my roster twice because he has two positions within my organization. Question that comes up is, well, I don't see a login name there or an email address. Well, the reason for that is we're not forcing you to maintain these individuals' email or obtain their email address. When they log into the system or when they generate their account in the system and they associate their PIN number with their LGO account, then this will automatically update for you, just to show you what their username is for the system. You'll notice that Steve's PIN number is the same. So each individual, no matter how many positions he has or she has within your organization, their PIN number will always be the same. Okay, so you'll see that the PIN number actually stays the same. And I'm going to write this down because I'm going to need this a little bit later when I register. You're going to see under the FDS filed status, it says no because an FDS has not been filed status, and Steve is an active part of my organization on my roster because we have the check boxes right there. If I want to go in and I need to add another position for Steve, let's say I forgot a position, I can just click on the edit button and it'll take me back to the same screen I was before where I entered the positions. Here I can come in and I can actually add another position if I need to, or I could say, at this point in time, you know what? Steve wasn't part of the planning board this year. He was there last year. I kind of forgot. Well, then I can actually delete that position here as well, too. A position can only be deleted or a person can only be deleted off your roster as long as an FDS has not been filed. Once an FDS is filed for this person, you will not be able to delete that person off your roster, right? So right now we do see the delete button listed up here, but again, once that person is deleted off your roster, once they file an FDS, you won't be able to delete them off your roster. So let's go. One more thing I want to show you on the screen. I mentioned earlier that once you add all the positions here, what you could do is you can click on the print button and actually print this screen out, okay? It'll ask for what printer you want, your normal printer dialog box. So just select the printer you want to print it to, and then what you can do is you can actually just take that print out and hand it to Steve and say, here's your information, for the new financial disclosure system. You'll need this information when you go in and register. So again, that's how you manage or add those rosters or print out that roster information within the system. I'll click on back, come back out to my roster. If I had any new LGOs I had to enter in, I can come in here and I can click on Add LGO, and I can enter them. Now, as you go throughout the year, you're going to have members of your organization. You're going to have new members who join your organization where you would add them to the system, or you're going to have people that maybe have a new position. They're already on your roster, but they have a new position. You can come into the system at any point in time during the year and maintain or manage your roster. You can add new people, new positions, or whatever. You can do it at any point throughout the year. So again, that's really how you add your LGOs to your roster. I'll click out to the home screen. You'll notice that my LGO roster now says I have 9 people on the roster, okay, because we just added one person, Steve, so my roster went from 8 to 9, but my FDS submissions are still at 8, right? We've only had 8 submissions. The last thing I'll show you on the screen, yes?
Patty, I just want to interrupt for a second with the code word.
Oh, sure.
Sorry, the word is duckling, D-U-C-K-L-I-N-G.
And just to repeat that again, duckling, D-U-C-K-L-I-N-G. That will be the second code word.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Nope, that's okay. That's fine. That's fine. Thank you, Patty.
All right.
Okay, so the last thing what we'll do here on this screen is your report section. We do have reports, and we're going to be adding reports. One is going to be just a quick report, your local government official roster. You can print out this report, so it's a printout report of everybody that's on your roster. So you can just come in here, click on that link, and print out the roster at that point in time. So from an LGE standpoint, that's really all you need to do within the system from a manage the roster standpoint. You come in, you click on the manage roster link, and come in here, add your individuals to your roster, any new positions, so on and so forth. That's how you would do that. So I'm going to pause here. We're going to jump over in a few seconds. I'm going to show you how to create, or how an LGO would create their account on the system. But first, I'm going to answer any questions that we have here. So let's go through here. So the first question I have is, I am a new deputy clerk and want to know how I will receive a login and password. Again, we will, if the information is on the GovConnect site, that information will be emailed to whatever's listed on the GovConnect site. If you do not receive that information, what I would recommend, Roberta, is that you contact the DCA and make sure that they have the correct contact information for you if you're listed on their roster to send that information to. Next question, can we get a copy of the PowerPoint? The PowerPoint is just 2 screens. Yes, you mean we can maybe post that somewhere. I will let you know that we are recording all these webinars. We will be putting them up on a website so people can go back later on and kind of go through the webinar again. But from a PowerPoint standpoint, yeah, I'll work with Chris and we'll see. We'll probably maybe put that up on the website as well too. I don't think that's a problem, but we'll try to do that as well too. Next question. I have several LGOs who are elderly and not interested in having emails. Can one email serve for multiple LGOs? I'm anticipating that most of my planning board will not use the system and I will have to input their information for them. Okay, so there's a couple of questions here, so let me answer several questions. First of all, each LGO will have to have their own email address. You cannot share one email for multiple LGOs. What we would recommend is for an email address is if your organization can assign an email address to that LGO, that would be the first choice. If that is not available, then what we recommend is go out to one of the free sites like Gmail, Yahoo, Outlook.com. You can get or set up an account, free email address out there as well too. But each LGO will need their own individual email address. The second question, or the last question that came up is, I am anticipating most of the planning board will use this system and I will have to input their information for them. I don't know if Chris is still on the line. I know he generally answers this question, but doing this now for the 7th time, I can pretty much answer for Chris. Even though there's not a directive that says you can't enter the information in for your LGOs, it's highly frowned upon. And the reason being is that if the information that you enter into that LGO for their FDS and gets submitted, if somebody comes back and files an ethics complaint, you know, who is the LGO going to say enter the information into the system? I mean, they're not going to say they did it because they didn't do it. They're going to point to you. So as Chris has said, if somebody forgets to list their beach house on Long Beach Island, you know, who's the finger going to be pointed at if, you know, an ethics complaint is, you know, generated, you know, for that LGO? So again, you can guide those LGOs on how to do it. What we recommend, we understand that there is an elderly crowd out there that might have a hard time doing this. By all means, they can come into your office. You can sit with them. You can instruct them. You can show them. We don't think the system is that difficult for them to enter the information in. But again, you can guide them and, as the best of your ability. The other thing we recommend is that these LGOs contact a family member to help them, whether it's a son, a daughter, a grandchild, a friend, to help them do that. But all financial disclosure statements starting this year will have to be filed online, and you'll need that email address in order to do that. Next question, does a committee council liaison have to file? Again, there's documentation out there on the DCA site. There's also information out there on the municipal clerk's website on who and who does not have to file. It is recommended that you get with your labor council for your organization and you consult with them to see who has to file and who hasn't filed. I know Chris has said a good starting point would be to look at your roster from last year and see who's on your roster from last year and who filed. That would be a good starting point on who has to file and who doesn't. But you really should get with your council to really determine, who within your organization should file and who doesn't have to file. Next question, will the public have access to email that the LGO puts in? No. As of this time, we don't believe it's going to be something that the public will have access to or can be obtained through Oprah. Since the email address is used as a username, not as a identifier for communication, it's used more as a username along with your password. It'd be the same as, if you had a email address for your banking account, online banking account information, right? You wouldn't give out that information. So at this point in time, we believe that that information can't be obtained through an Oprah request, and we're not maintaining it in the system as a form of communication. We're using it as a username for their credentials, so no. Next question that came up is, what if an LGO is listed on the roster but then resigns from the position before he and she post an FDS? If there is a resign notification or anything like that to inform them that the individual has not filed a report and will not be filing one. James, that's a good question. I don't know if Chris or Patty's still on the line, if they can maybe answer that question.
Well, I know that if the person is in office as of April 30th, they would be required to file the form. So what you're saying is if the person resigns after April 30th, you've put them on the roster, what would happen? I guess, Mark, can they delete the person, make them inactive at that point?
Yeah, they could.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because from our side, if the person is in office on April 30th, they're still required to file. So if they haven't filed and they resign on May 15th, they should have filed anyway. And if they are deactivated prior to April 30th, then I guess you go into your roster and you reflect that they are no longer active.
Correct. Okay, good. Thank you, Patty. Okay, next question. I am an administrator in one town and a council person in another town. Do I need to file 2 FDSs? It depends, Colleen, and I'm going to show you in a few minutes, if you stay on, how you can actually, for both positions, you can file just 1 FDS, and it will depend on when you get your PIN numbers and how you register them within the system. So if you just wait a few minutes, I'll kind of show you how you just need to file 1 FDS one time to cover all your different positions in different entities. Next question. I'm concerned that the email address on the FDS screen becomes subject to Oprah. I think we kind of answered that question. It's really the email address is not for communication purposes. It's more utilized as a username within the system. So it's more of a username, password, credential type thing, and that would be the stance that you would have to go by, that it is, a confidential, piece of information and it's not subject to Oprah. And then the last thing, when can we start using the system? Again, we haven't determined the go-live date. We're hoping within the next 7 to 10 days for the system to be available and up and running. That information will be communicated to you from the DCA once we have an official go-live date. So based on that, I know the next question that usually comes up is, well, isn't April 30th the filing deadline? As of right now, that date has been pushed back to May 15th. We do anticipate that date changing again based on the date that the system goes live. But the official date right now has been pushed back to May 15th. But again, please keep in mind that that is going to probably, move back once the system goes live. Okay, good. So I've gotten through all the questions so far. Not bad for the crowd that we have on this morning. So let's do this. I'm going to move on. I'm going to actually click on the log out button. I'm going to log out, and I'm going to come back to our login screen. And what I'm going to show you next is how do we register as an LGO within the system. Again, as you know, since the majority of the people on today's call are municipal clerks, you're going to have to file an SDS. So I'm going to show you how you would actually go through the registration process in order to set up your account within the system. So on this login screen, what you'll see in the lower left-hand corner of the login screen, it says New Registration Local Government Officers. If I click on this link, what the system's going to do is the system's going to have me start my registration process. So the first thing I need to do is come in here and I need to put in my first and last name, and then I also need to put in the PIN number that was given to me, okay? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put in the PIN number that was issued to me from Edison, okay? And if that PIN number, that first name, last name, and PIN number are correct, and I click on Validate PIN, the system should validate my information. But oh, look what happened. It says first name, last name, and PIN number didn't match. Please verify and try again. Well, that's because I put in my first name, I put Steve instead of Steven. Again, that's why it's important that when you communicate this information to your LGO, you let them know exactly how you entered their information within the system. Now if I put in Steven as my first name, I should put Williams, right? That would have been a mistake too. Now I click on Validate PIN. Now the system tells me that the PIN has been validated successfully. Now I can continue on with my registration. So I'll come in here and I will put in my address. Now I'm going to create my login information. So again, we're utilizing an email address as the username or the login information. So, and what we'll do is we'll type it again just to confirm it. And then I'll put a password in as well too. Oops. I forgot to move to the field. And one of the questions that has come up in the past is, can I tab between the fields as I'm working within the system? And the answer is yes. You can actually tab through the different fields. So now once I enter that information in, at the bottom of the screen, we have some definitions and instructions about filing the FDS that we ask the LGO to read through. And then what we ask them to do is click on the checkbox that says they have read the definitions and instructions and that they agree with them. And then once they do that and they click on the register link right here, okay, what that'll do is that should now register them within the system. So now I got a message in green that tells me I've been registered successfully in the system, okay? And at this point in time, they have their credential information listed here. They can actually print this out and keep it for safekeeping, so if they need it later on, they know exactly what to use. But once their account is now established and created within the system, then what we can do is we can come back out to the login page and we can actually log into the system. But before I do that, there's actually one thing I wanted to do first before I actually logged in as the LGO. And one of the questions that came up is, what if you are part of a couple of different entities and you need to, register or just file one LGS at one time? How would I do that? So what I'm going to do quickly is I'm going to add myself in another organization. So let me just come in here. Just add me to another organization. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log into another municipality, in this case South Brunswick Township. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add myself onto their roster. Let's say in South Brunswick Township, I happen to be the tax collector. So I'm going to add my first name, my last name, and I'm going to click on Save, okay? It's going to generate a PIN number. So this is a unique number. This is for South Brunswick Township. Okay. And then I'm just going to add my information here, my position to South Brunswick Township. And I'll click on Save. And now this position has been added to South Brunswick Township as a tax collector. So the reason why I did that, and actually let me just log out of here because now I'm going to log in as the LGO, is as an LGO, if I'm a member of multiple organizations, remember, each organization is going to have to put me on their roster and issue me a PIN number from each organization. When I go to file my FDS, if I associate all those different PIN numbers with my account, I can file an FDS for all those positions at one point in time. I don't have to file multiple. I could do it with just one. But let's say I registered my Edison Township PIN number today, and I filed my FDS today, and then a week from now, South Brunswick gives me their PIN number. Well, because I've already filed my FDS for Edison, now what I have to do is I have to file it a second time because my position with South Brunswick Township wasn't listed on my initial filing with that FDS. So whatever positions and PIN numbers you've registered with your account at the time you file will all be filed together. So let me log into the account I just created within the system. This is the LGO account. Okay. And when I first log into the system here, get the right email. Okay. When I first log into the system here, did I type the wrong password before? Sorry. Let's try this one more time. Okay, let me do this. I hope I didn't have my cap locks on. I'll double check, make sure. Okay, so that's been emailed to me. Let's try that again, because I might have had my cap locks on before. That was it. I had my cap locks on before when I entered my password. So the password is a good example. Password is case sensitive, so just keep that in mind when you do enter your password in. Now that I've logged in as an LGO, what you'll see is you'll see a screen that looks very similar to what you saw before when you logged in as an LGE, but a little bit different. The icons are a little bit different. Up at the top, it'll tell them the year that they're submitting for, in this case 2014. It'll show them that their submission is pending, okay, so they haven't filed yet. They'll have an edit profile button where they can actually come in and they can edit their information, right? So when I first created my account, let's say, I have to change something. Maybe I moved from last year to this year and I need to update my information. I can actually come in here and update my information. The Manage Positions link is where I would actually add multiple PIN numbers to my account. So once the account is first established, and one of the questions that comes up a lot of times is, well, if I've been given multiple PIN numbers, which one do I use to establish my account? The answer is it doesn't matter. You could just use any of the PIN numbers that you've been assigned to initially establish your account within the system. Once your account is established within the system, then you could take those other PIN numbers and associate them with your account. You don't have to have multiple accounts within the system. So here I'm going to come in. I'm going to enter in the information that I was given from South Brunswick Township, and I'm going to put in the PIN number that they issued me. And if you notice, what I did here is when I registered or I put myself on the roster in South Brunswick Township, I didn't use Stephen, I used Steve. So again, I wanted to show you that, you could use the short name as well too between different organizations. It doesn't have to be identical, from each entity, how it was put in. But if I validate my PIN number now, it's going to tell me that my PIN number has been validated successfully. And you'll notice down below in this section that all my positions are now entered here. Okay, so we'll see the two from Edison Township, as the council person and the planning board member, and you'll see the one from South Brunswick Township as the tax collector. So since I haven't filed an FDS yet, when I go to file the FDS, all these positions that I have associated with my account will now be included in that FDS file. So let's do that real quick. Let's go out to the home screen. I'm going to click on File Financial Disclosure Statement. Okay. Now this process here is going to go through basically the paper form, each section on the paper form. So we actually have 8 screens we're going to go through, and each screen is its own section within the form. So here we have the information that pulls up, right? So I have my first name, my last name that come up. you'll see that home address is optional. Now, the home address does pull from my registration information. Because it is optional, if I don't want to list it on my FDS, I can just clear that information out. I can add information if I need to. So I'll add my business phone number. I'm going to add my wife, since there's going to be information that I need to report for her. So I'm going to add my spouse's name there as well, too. And then down below, as I'm filing this FDS, you'll see the positions that are going to apply are going to be on this FDS as I file, right? So you'll see the 3 positions listed down here. Now, I could do one of two things here. I can either click on the Save button and save this information, or I can click on the Next and go to the next screen. When I click on Next, it'll also save as well, too. But if I just click on Save, it'll just save the information. It'll tell me in green that the information has been stored successfully, and it'll keep me on this screen. So just in case I want to give it one more look over, I can. If I'm fine with this first screen, I can now move on to the next screen. Here it's going to ask me to list all my sources of income, right? So I'm going to list my source of income. So I'm going to say South Brunswick Township, okay? Okay, and I'm going to say it's going to default to self, right? So this is the source of income, so I'm going to click on Save. I'm going to report on my wife's income as well, too. Right, and I'm going to list it as spouse there. So I'll say spouse, and I'll click on Save. And you'll notice down below in the list of entry section, it's going to keep adding to that list. And I can list all the different sources of income that I might get, from, that I need to report. So here I'm listing it. That's myself as well, too. So I can just keep adding. And you'll notice down at the bottom, it just keeps adding all that information. At this point in time, if I'm fine, I can click on Next, go on to the next screen, and now it's going to ask me to list any sources of fees or honorariums, okay? I don't have any, so I'm just going to click on Next, and oh, look what I got. I got a message that came up that says, to proceed, at least one entry should be added to this list, or you have to select none. So the system is not going to allow you to go from screen to screen unless you add some entries to this screen, or you click on the None checkbox. So here in this case, I'm saying I don't have any fees or honorariums, so I'm just going to click on None. I'm going to click on Next. It's going to take me to the next screen to list any sources of gifts, reimbursements, or prepaid expenses. Again, I don't have any, so again, I would have to click on the None checkbox in order to proceed through the next screen. Here, it's going to ask me to list any interest I held, right? So I'm going to say, I own part of the Metuchen Bagel Shop. Right? I'll hit Save, so I'll add that entry down below as well, too. Now, as I'm going through this whole process, at any point in time, if I want to take a look at how my FDS form looks, I can click on this Preview FDS form right here. And if I do this, this is one of those pop-ups that come up, and also where you would need that PDF, Adobe Acrobat Reader, or some other type of compatible PDF viewer. But basically what's going to happen is I'm going to see a copy of my form come up, and I can actually review that form at any point in time as I'm going through this whole process. So we'll just give it a second here for this to come up. It's Monday morning, a little slow. Okay, so here we go. So we're going to see actually a copy of the form and everything that I've entered so far, right? So we see my initial information up at the top. We see my positions that are being reported, my sources of income. I go to the next screen here. Section D is, the interest that I held, right? So at any point in time, I can take a look at that FDS form and see where we're at. Now, one of the questions that comes up is, let's say we go to the next screen, and now I come up to the screen where I need to list all real property that I own or have an interest in within the state of New Jersey. Let's say I come up to this section, and I don't have the block and lot numbers of the property offhand. Well, if I get out of the system and I come back in later on, whether it's later today, tomorrow, next week, what have you, one of the changes that we've made from the system from last year to this year is that the person who's filing that FDS will not lose this information. We retain all the information that the person has entered up to this point. So they can just come back into and come all the way to this 6th screen, and they can, just enter the additional information that they didn't have at that time. We're also going to be, for the following years or following FDS filings, we'll have this information stored in the system. So they'll be able to retain or pull up the previous information, make any changes that might need to be done, and then just submit that new information as they move forward. But let's say here, me and my wife, we have a house together in Edison. So I'll pick Edison as my town. I'll put in my block and lot number here. And I say both, me and my wife both own 50% of the house. It's a 50-50 relation, ownership. So I'm going to say 50%. I'm going to click on Save. And then what I'll do is I'll come back down here, and after it adds it to the section down below, I'll pick Edison again. And what I'll do here is I'll say that, same block and lot. And I'll say 50% ownership by my spouse, and click on Save. And then I can list all that property that I own within the state of New Jersey down below and what that percentage is. I do know one of the problems last year, from what I heard, was it was hard to break out percentages. This year we allow you to do that within the system to list those different percentages. So again, you can come down here and do different percentages if need be. Now I'll click on Next button. That will take me to the next section, which is basically a comment section. And I'll just put in here your test FDS form. I'll click on Next. And now we come to the last screen, which is screen 8. And at this point in time, what's going to happen is, now this is where the person who's filing this FDS can actually submit their FDS. But one of the things I just wanted to point out is down here at the bottom, you'll notice the box that says Submit Financial Disclosure Statement is grayed out. The reason why it's grayed out is we're going to force that individual who's filing the FDS to at least look at their paper copy of the FDS. Even if they haven't hit Preview FDS Form before, we're going to force them right here to review their financial disclosure statement first before they submit it, right? So they're going to have to click on this link here. When they do that, again, it will come up with their form, right? They'll see their complete form. And you'll notice here that the date and the name is not filled out. That's because this form hasn't been submitted yet. Once it is submitted, that date and name will appear there. So I reviewed my form. And then the last thing we're going to ask them to do is electronically sign their form by putting in their information. Right, so I'm going to list my name. I'm Stephen Williams here. I'm going to type my name. And then once I do that, now I'll be able to click on the Submit Financial Disclosure. And what they're going to get is they're going to get a box that comes up to let them know that once they submit this financial disclosure statement, they cannot amend, supplement, modify, or change this form whatsoever. Okay? Once it's submitted, it's submitted. They can't do anything else to the form. So they have to make sure that the information that's submitted is accurate and all the information is there. But let's say I've gone over this twice, I double-checked it, triple-checked it, so on and so forth. I'm comfortable with the information I've entered in. At this point in time, I can click on OK. And then what's going to happen is the system's going to give me a message up at the top in green. It's going to tell me that my form has been submitted successfully. It's going to give me a confirmation ID number, 39, and it's going to tell me the date and the exact time that I submitted this form. I can print out a copy for my records by clicking on the print button at the bottom. Okay. If I want to view my FDS form, we'll notice the same form comes up, but now on the second page, I have a date that it was submitted, and my electronic signature that was applied to the form is listed there as well, too. So one of the questions that come up, especially from the municipal clerks, or what's going to be different from this year than what's happened in the past, last year, is that with last year's system, once that LGO filed their FDS, there was a receipt that printed at the end of the process. They came into your office, or they got to you somehow, gave you a copy of that receipt and also a copy of their FDS form. That no longer has to be done. You're not required to get a receipt. You're no longer required to get a copy of the FDS form. And the reason for that is what I'm going to show you in a few seconds when I move over to the public site. But once that LGO files their FDS within the system, immediately that information will be available to be viewed on the public site, so the public can go in and view it. And also, too, at the same time, on your roster that you maintain, that column that says FDS file that said no initially now has been made a yes because that information has been filed. So again, I'm going to show you that in 2 seconds here. So let me click on the home button.
Can I interrupt? I'm just going to give the next word.
Yep.
All right, the last word is Florida, as in the state, Florida.
Thank you, Patty.
Okay.
Okay, so Florida, everybody, for the final keyword. Those are the 3 words that were the third of the 3 that you got today. Okay, so back out on the LGO's homepage, you'll notice that FDS submission says submitted. Okay, so their FDS has been submitted, and if you look on the file financial disclosure link, I can't click on that anymore because once it's filed, it's filed. They can't make any changes to it. Now, question that comes up is, let's say a month from now, I'm appointed to a new board, either within Edison, South Brunswick, or even another entity. You know, what do I have to do? Well, you have 30 days to file an FDS for that new position. Once you get that new PIN number, or you're added to, let's say, an existing roster, let's say Edison Township, I was added, then what would happen is this FDS submission will say submission pending, because you have one new position you have to file for, and at that point in time, your financial disclosure statement filing link will now be enabled. Now you can go and file for that new position you've just added to the system, okay? So again, those are the different ways, you know, or how you would actually file another FDS within the system. We recommend that you let your LGOs know, wait for them to obtain all their PIN numbers first and register them in one shot. If they register all their PIN numbers, then they only have to do that FDS filing one time within the system. So that being said, let me log out here real quick. I'm just going to show you the public site, which is this link here. So there's going to be a public search site that the public can actually go out and actually search and view the FDSs that have been filed. We recommend that if you get an OPA request, you point the people back out to this site. You won't have to file that, or you won't have to answer that OPA request because you're no longer going to be getting those FDS forms. You just let the people know they can go out to this public site and they can search. So there's 2 ways you can search out on this public site. I can search by an individual's last name, right? So if I want to look for Steve Williams, I would put in his last name, I click on search, and then every Steve Williams that's in the system would come up, right? So I see here, oh, look at this, right? Or all the Williams that are in the system would come up. I see I have Stephen Williams, I have Stephen Williams, and I have Steve Williams, right? So we know they're all the same because that's how we entered them within the system. But this is how they appeared on their rosters. Here's my 2 Edison Townships, and here's my South Brunswick Township as the tax collector. If I want to review an FDS, I just click on the View button. Okay, what that'll do is, as the public user, I can view that FDS. I see it there, great. I can just click on any of these View buttons and pull up the FDSs. Now, since we filed all 3 positions at one time, obviously these are all going to be the same FDS. But again, if Steve Williams had a different FDS filed at a different point in time, then we could do that one if it was on a different submitted date. So that's one way you can search and pull up the financial disclosure statements. The other way you can do it is you can do it by entity, right? So let's say I wanted to pull up all the FDS employees or roster LGOs for Edison Township. So I put in Edison Township as the local government entity. I would hit search, and then everybody that has filed within Edison Township will come up on that list. And again, I can click on that View button and go into each individual one, or what we've done is we've made it easy where if they want to download all these in one shot and then view them later, they can click on individual checkboxes here, or they can just click on the all at the top. And then what we ask them to do is put in this little captcha phrase in order to actually download all of them. So let me just put that in. I'll hit download. And now what will happen is they'll get a response, a PDF response, to either open or save it. If I open it, we'll notice now that all these forms that I've just selected, the whole list, right, I have 16 pages, right? This is everybody's FDS from Edison Township that's been filed, right? So in one shot, I get all their FDSs. And one thing you'll notice this year from last year is that it's more uniform, right? Everything is now legible. You can read them, you know. So again, and it's all uniform as we go through the system. So again, that's how the public would actually go out and view that information. Last thing before I finish up with the last questions here, if I log back in as the LGE again, back into Edison Township, and look at my roster, we will notice that on my roster in Edison Township that Steve Williams, right down here, under FDS file is now yes. So again, if you want to see at any point in time within your organization who has filed and who hasn't filed, you can quickly look at your roster and you can take a look who's filed. Remember, as an LGE, it's not your responsibility to babysit the LGOs in filing. It's their responsibility, right? As a local government official, it's part of their part of the things that they need to do as as being a government official, they have to file that. So again, but if you want to just give them a gentle nod and say, listen, I notice you still haven't filed your FDS yet. By all means, you can do that, but that will show you or list right there who has filed and who hasn't filed within your organization. So that's the majority of our presentation today. Let me go to our question pane because I know this is where we take the majority of our questions, and I'll try to answer as many questions as possible as we go through here. So a question that came up, it says, I guess it says, have you received the ruling from the GRC that emails provided are not subject to OPRA? You keep saying that you believe they are not subject to OPRA. Do you have that on paper from GRC or DLGS? The answer is no. That is not, again, because this is a newer system, the answer is no. But, I know Chris isn't on the call now, but he believes that it wouldn't be something that could be obtained through OPRA. Again, because it is username and password. It's like saying that if the township, CFO used their email address to log into their banking information, could you theoretically ask them for that email address? So it's the same principle, but again, no, there is no, it hasn't gone to the GRC yet. So that's why we're saying we don't believe it is, something that could be obtained through OPRA. It says, what if the LGO loses their password? Can we see it or reset it for them? No. The LGO on the login screen can go out to the Forgot Password link. They can click on that link. They can put in their email address that they've registered for, and that password will be emailed to that account as long as it's a valid email address. You cannot reset it. You cannot manage their LGO account. Okay. Next question. Okay, I'm the planning board secretary, the Board of Health secretary, the zoning officer, animal registrar, deputy municipal clerk. Do I have to list all these positions? Nancy, again, I go out to the information that's out there on both the DCA site.
I can answer that.
Okay.
All right. You only need to list the positions that require you to file the disclosure statement. So those positions that are not required to file a form don't need to be listed.
Okay. Thank you. Next question. Will the municipal clerks be able to generate an editable file for all the positions reassigned with their PIN numbers? Yes, there's going to be a report that you can generate that lists everybody's PIN number. Now, one thing we do not recommend is that you email that report out to everybody with everybody's PIN number on it. Again, we recommend that you work one-on-one with each LGO and give them their name that you registered them under and also their PIN number. Again, you could send that via email, but I wouldn't print out the entire report or the entire roster like you see here, so everybody can see everybody's PIN number and names, how they were registered within the system. I would try to keep that as confidential. Just not to say things can't happen, but again, we don't want people registering under other LGOs information. Okay, it says, if deputies are not assigned in the GovConnect, will we do that in order to receive a logon as an LGE? Initially, what's going to happen is that information that we have from GovConnect, if it's the municipal clerk, is going to get the login information initially. Now, there's only going to be, for this year, one login name and password used to manage the rosters. If you as the clerk don't do that process and you assign it to somebody else, whether it's a deputy clerk or another assistant or somebody within your organization, what we recommend is that when you change that temporary password, change it to a password that you're both comfortable using, maybe not your own personal password that you use for other accounts if you're not comfortable with giving out that password. You can make the password anything you want. You can change it at any point in time. So you could temporarily assign a password now that another person is using, and then once they're finished managing the LGO roster, at that time you can actually change the password again to your own password if you want to keep it at that point in time. So you could change the password as many times as you want, but for right now there's only going to be one username issued, and it's most likely going to go to the clerk. Next question, how do we suggest we let everyone know that they need to do this process? Well, again, as you know, LGOs, as local government officials, they should already know that they have to file an FDS, especially if they filed it in the past. For the new process, what we're going to do is, one of the things we're going to be doing is on one of the sites, we're going to have a short tutorial, video tutorial for the LGOs that they can run through. So it goes over the process that on how to register their account and how to file their FDS. So we're working on that. That will be available by the time the system goes live. But again, I would suspect that any time a new LGO comes into your organization, you let them know somehow that they need to, file an FDS. So again, I'm not sure what your process is within your organization, but if they've done it in the past, they should already know that they're responsible for filing an FDS. Next question, does the LGA who creates the roster have to use a different email address when they file as an LGO? Yes. If you're filing as an LGO, you will need to use a different email address. You can utilize your personal email address. You can obtain another email address from your organization. You can create another email address, with, again, one of the free services like Gmail, Yahoo, Outlook, so on and so forth. But you would have to use a different email address as an LGO that you use as an LGE. You can't use the same email address. Next question, will the LGOs receive detailed filing instructions? Again, I mentioned there'll be instructions on the website, the live site once we go live, plus a short tutorial on how to file their FDS. Next question, just to confirm, we are no longer required to keep paper copies. DCA will handle maintaining records under the DARM schedule. Yes, as far as I know, you do not have to get a paper copy anymore. Since this is now going to be on the public site, anybody who needs to get a copy of that FDS can just go out to the public site. And I believe that the DARM standards will be followed in regards to the FDS and the retention policy and so on and so forth for that information. Next question, are we required to keep a copy of the FDS? Again, no, as of this time, no. I know Chris had said you don't have to get a copy anymore. It's going to be out on the public site. That's where the public can actually go and actually view any FDSs. Or anybody. I mean, you could go out there as well, too, as an LGE, and you could look at them. Anybody within the organization will be able to go to that site and view anybody's FDS that has been filed.
And Mark, I think Chris also said that to the degree you wanted to as a local government, you could download your municipality's files to your own system if you wanted to keep them separate. In other words, you wouldn't have to print them, but you could save them electronically as a whole entity to your own system.
Correct. You're absolutely right, Patty. Just like I demonstrated before, when I went out to the public site, I can pick Edison Township. I can select everybody who's filed in Edison Township and just save that electronic PDF on my computer, and now I have a copy of everybody's FDS in electronic form. I don't have to have the paper copy. So, but again, it will be out on that public site, and as of right now, it will be out there as long. I don't know what the retention policy is offhand for the FDSs.
It's 5 years.
Okay. So I would assume that they'll be there for a minimum of 5 years out on the site. So, okay, next question. What if the LGO does not have a personal computer? Is it safe to use a public computer, in the library and so on and so forth? Yes, that's fine. They could do that. I know Chris has also said that, since these LGOs are technically part of your organization, there's nothing from you allowing them to use maybe a computer even within, let's say the municipality, county, whatever. But yes, wherever they can get to a computer, yes, the information is safe as they submit that information. Next question, can you review again the process of the RMC CEUs for this webinar? Basically, there's a form out on the DCA site that you can actually download. Complete that form, include the keywords that we gave you throughout the process today, throughout the webinar, and then submit that form to Dan Kaminsky, and then at that point in time, you should receive your CEUs for this webinar. Let's see, next question. Will there be an extension for filing again this year? As I mentioned earlier, right now the date as of today is May 15th. We do anticipate that date changing based on the go live date. But as of right now, the official date is technically May 15th as the deadline. But again, we do anticipate that changing once the go live date is. We don't know how long it's going to be extended for, but we do anticipate some extension there as well too. Next question, just beware. If the clerk does download the reports or create a local file, then OPRA is applicable because the clerk has created a local file. It's safer to just not download the forms and leave them available to the public online at the state site. Thanks, James. Okay, so just a recommendation from James, saying that if you do download these and somebody comes in with an OPRA request, then you would be responsible for providing them since you do have a copy obtained within your organization. So he's saying it's just easier just to point them out to the public site and have them, search them on their own. So thanks for that comment there, James. And those are all the questions I have up to this point. Like I said, we're done pretty much for the webinar today. We will stay on, for another, 5 minutes or so and answer any additional questions that come up. But again, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We're excited. I believe the process overall is going to be a lot easier for everybody. And again, as you start using the system, there will be documentation on the website, instructions on how to utilize the system, contact information in case you have any problems. The first point of contact most likely will be the DCA, especially if it's questions regarding to the process and all that. But if there's technical questions, obviously Sunrise will be involved at some point for those technical questions. So I do have another question that came up here. It's actually a suggestion. It says if the LGE enters an email for the LGO, can it prompt the system to send an email to the LGO? Again, right now we do not have a field in the system for the LGE to enter an email address in. The email address that you saw displayed in your roster actually just got associated once the LGO registered. So we don't physically, or you as an LGE, do not have a field to capture that email address. And that's one of the reasons why when the whole OPRA requesting came up is you're not storing that information within your section of the system, the roster. We do display it as a display option once the LGO registers, but it's really just a display-only option. Okay, let's see here, just going through any other questions that came up. Okay, it says, one question says, can we begin compiling the roster on the site now, or do we have to wait for the site to go live? You have to wait for the site to go live. I'm working in the test site right now, so unfortunately, there's nothing you can enter in today. But as a suggestion, if you want to start, kind of maybe just in a spreadsheet, so you have it once the site goes live, you have all that information like the person's first name, their last name, the border, the agency, and the position, because those are going to be the required fields that you need for the roster. You might just want to put that into a spreadsheet right now, so when the system does go live, whether it's yourself or whether you have somebody else go through that spreadsheet, it'll be a lot quicker to kind of add all those people to your roster at that point in time. But like I said, we're expecting the site to go live within the next 7 to 10 days. Okay, so those are the questions I have so far. Again, I'll stay on a few more minutes. If you have any other questions that you want to ask, feel free to do. Okay, so next question that just came in, it says, when are the FDS forms due? Again, as of right now, that date is May 15th right now, but we anticipate that date changing. We don't know what it's going to change to. It's all dependent on the actual go live date, but as of right now, it is May 15th is the official date as of today. Next question that came in said, can we get a copy of the printed instructions for the LGOs now? We don't have them. They're in the process of being put together. Like I said, we are going to have them available once the site goes live. There is some last-minute stuff that's being done, The video will be there as well, too, for the LGOs to go through the process of registering. But I don't have anything as of today that we can actually send out. They are being worked on as we speak. Okay, next question says, Lorraine sat in with me since her computer was down this morning. Can she still get CEUs? You mean she can fill out the form. If she sat in, with you, that's fine. Yes, you mean she can submit a form as long as she has the code words. There shouldn't be a problem with her getting credit for that, for attending the webinar today. Okay, everybody, it's almost 11:30. No other questions have come in at this point in time. I want to thank everybody again for attending today's webinar. If you have any questions, after the fact, again, there'll be contact numbers of people you need to contact. Like I said, mainly the DCA will be the first point of contact, and at that point in time, we'll make sure that we answer your questions. Oh, I do have one question that came in here. It says, I'm sorry, but I am not clear how I will get the information. I am an LGE in the county. Is the email I used to be on call the one that will be used? Sorry for the confusion. Felicia, again, I know the DCA is getting the email addresses from the GovConnect site. I'm not sure, especially at the county level, whose email addresses they have, if it's the county clerk or who has done this before. You might want to contact the DCA, whether it's Chris, and just ask him. Again, I know they're currently just finalizing that list, so you might want to just send them an email and ask who they have as a contact from Monmouth County. So it says, when will we be receiving the form to fill out to send to Dan Kaminsky? You will not get a form. You will have to go out to the DCA website and download the form. I believe it's the form for independent training. I think, as Chris has said, if like you attended some type of training in another state, there's a form out there on the DCA website that you can actually download and complete, and then send that form to Dan Kaminsky. But forms are not going to be sent to you. You'll have to go out and download that from the DCA site. Okay. Well, again, everybody, I'm going to end this webinar now. Again, I thank you, and I hope everybody has a great day. Take care.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, thank you.